Welcome back. We've been focusing extensively on truck attacks. Well, today, in fact, role players in the transport and logistics industry have been calling for protection following that spate of trucks being set alight. They form part of those gathered at the CSIR in Pretoria on day 2 of the 41st Southern African Transport Conference. 2 more trucks were set alight in Empangeni and KwaZulu-Natal overnight. It comes after at least 15 trucks were torched in separate incidents over the weekend across 3 provinces, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga and Limpopo. They say there is a need for concrete interventions to safeguard the trucks, drivers and the country's economy. Well, SABC economics reporter Katlego Lekhodi is at the Southern African Transport Conference and joins us now. So that is the CSIR Centre in Pretoria. Katlego, tell us more. So these are the people who represent the big trucking companies and are involved. This is their business. Just tell us more about what they say.
Most definitely. A very good afternoon to you, Francis, and to our viewers at home. Of course, today's talks just dominated by shocks coming from those within this sector that are talking about counting the losses, looking at these buses or these trucks, rather, that have been torched over time. We're talking about 15 of those trucks cross-provincial, those that have really found themselves in the receiving end. Here we're talking about the logistics sector and those that are in the long distant truck sector, and they're calling today for concrete interventions coming from government, and saying as well that there is a role that the private sector can just come through with to try by all means to mitigate here. You can imagine that most of them are worried about small scale business operators that are just new in this space, to say that when you look at it, those are spooked as we speak right now, because this is an industry that has over time experienced challenges, but we're seeing some of those issues coming under the spotlight, and the economy as well just taking center stage, because you can imagine, Francis, when those incidents tend to happen, then we get the economy that is hampered. We're hearing that these attacks on the N3, on the N4, they're basically taking place at the main arteries of these corridors where we're expecting movement from one province to the next. I'm going to bring some of them into the conversation with us this afternoon. I'm going to bring Abdul to just really reflect with us. We know very well that you are in the logistics space, and we're talking about counting the losses as we speak right now. There are drivers as we speak that are also scared for their lives, because really you don't know what is happening right now. We're waiting for the authorities to really give us a sense of what is happening right now. What have been the sentiments on the ground, especially looking at the torching of these trucks?
Yeah, it's actually quite a serious problem, but I think it's a problem that we need to look at in different layers. So you actually have those who are actually perpetrating these things, and it could be rural communities that feel that their calls for service delivery are not being heeded. Urban communities, the same thing. But it's also, I think, in a wider sense, the last 3 incidents that we've had over this weekend and running up to this morning, it looks like it's a national problem. It's not just service delivery. It's more like anarchy in some form. But I think if you look at the problem in the layers that it presents, you actually have the cause or the actual incident, but you have the driver who's there facing all of this. Now, we've had 3 drivers who were affected in the last month. 2 drivers who were affected by hijackings. One was held in the boot of the car for about 5 hours. One was held at gunpoint for about 4 hours. And then we had one who was in an incident where they burnt his truck with its cargo. So this driver was there pleading with them for 45 minutes that they do not actually harm his truck or his cargo, because that truck is his livelihood. His entire life depends on it. And this is all he knows. I mean, this is a driver who's been with us now for about 12 years. And he's a really good driver. He's professional, takes his work very seriously. And I think it's important to understand that 86% of the goods that travel in this country travel by road. So by harming our drivers, by placing them at risk, we actually harm our entire supply chain. I mean, the very clothes you're wearing was delivered by a truck. The food you eat was delivered by a truck. Now, our drivers, every time they go out there, they face dangers on the road. And our drivers do typically 15,000 kilometers, 20,000 kilometers in a month. Now, we can't add this danger to it, the danger of hijacking, the danger of your vehicle being burnt, the danger of being attacked, shot at. It's crazy. But I think we need to look at the problems that drivers are actually facing and the danger we're placing them in, but also the harm that's being done to our country's reputational risk, foreign investors, the harm that's being done to our transport companies. Now, transport companies work on very low margins. Typically, you have a transport company that will work on about 5%, which means if you're delivering something to Johannesburg and you're getting 3,000 Rand out of it, so that's typically what it costs to deliver a car. So it's 3,000 Rand is what you get as a rate to the client. But your profit in that is around 150 Rand. So you've got risk of R1 million in that transaction for 150 Rand benefit. But then if that car gets burnt, you've now got to pay that R1 million. So in that instant where we actually had the one truck burnt, we had a total loss of 9.5 million. And it's almost impossible for small companies to bear these losses. It's a huge financial burden. So we have this burden that the companies have to bear, and it's starting to constrict our growth and our ability to employ people. It's constricting our ability to actually serve society. But on a national scale, we're actually harming our country's global reputation as an investment destination. And if what we are seeing is because people are feeling disenfranchised and it's an outcry for help, then we are actually doing a disservice to ourselves, because with each one of these actions, we're actually taking away investment, we take away foreign direct investment, which means we will have fewer jobs created in the economy. So it's a cancer that we are starting within ourselves, and we're eating the economy away. So we are fighting for something, but the way we are fighting, the way we are articulating it is actually counterproductive.
And also, Abdul, we saw just last year a task team set up by the government to try and mitigate around these clashes around the trucking and the logistics sector. What is that task team telling us right now around the work that has been done to try and bring about harmony and peace within those that are in the trucking space? How have we fared where the task team is concerned?
Missing in action. The task team has not been seen. I mean, our N3 corridor, our N2 corridor, these are our vital corridors for our country. This is where all the goods are flowing. That task team is nowhere to be seen. Our truck drivers are on their own. They drive day and night, and they're defenseless. So what we need a task team to be highly responsive and to be responsible and accountable. When an incident occurs, the question needs to be asked, where were you? What did you do to prevent this? How did you bring the situation under control? We're not seeing that accountability. We're talking about a task team. Where's the task team? They're not where the task is. I don't know.
Do we then see companies having to then beef up security as well, on top of just ensuring that we move from one province to the next, one city to the next, and then we also have to hire private security to try and help in terms of transporting these goods, which would be at your cost as a company?
Well, yes and no. So we hire security teams, armed security teams for convoys for certain areas to improve safety on certain corridors. But we carry the cost immediately. But ultimately, that cost gets passed on to the economy. So all the goods that we carry, the cost of transport becomes more expensive. So your milk costs will go up, your bread costs will go up. Everything will go up over time to pay for the security costs. There's no free ride. So transport is a geographical arbitrage where we move things from point A to point B, but the cost incurred to do that is borne by the people who own the cargo. So society is going to pay for this in the long term. We're going to pay for it through jobs in terms of how people see our country as an investment destination, but the cost of carriage, the cost of security goes up, and that puts up your transport costs. So ultimately, in as much as we have to do whatever it takes to protect our drivers, to protect the cargo, to protect our assets, society bears the cost for it. So we need to stop this as a society. It's fundamental.
Yeah, because I was going to ask to say as to what can the communities do to help in ensuring that there's no interferences here to the economy, and that at least they also play a role, because we often then get to see disgruntlement from communities, like you've said here, that then often tends to spiral into what has been happening in the operations that you guys do. What can they do to help us where the sector is concerned?
I think where the issues around service delivery, there needs to be clear lines of communication between those communities that are affected and government, so that they can get the responses they need. Because crying out for attention by burning trucks doesn't solve the problem. You are actually burning your neighbor's house because you're not happy with the curtains you've got in your house. It's not right, it's not fair, and it's counterproductive. So I think the first thing we need to do is we need to keep these legitimate lines of communication open between the societies and government, right? So that solves that service service delivery issue. But the other issue, so other people who are riding on this and who are burning trucks for other reasons, for political purposes, I think that's where government needs to be decisive and treat it as treason, acts of treason, because this is our food supply chains. This is our essential goods and services that are carried. So if someone is disruptive to that, it should be regarded as an act of treason. Trucks carry 86% of the goods on our roads. So 86% of all the stuff that moves in our economy is on trucks. So if anyone is trying to disrupt that, they're disrupting the economy of our country, and it needs to be taken seriously.
Abdul, thank you very much for your time. Hopefully those solutions coming from this conference would see an agile movement to address these issues around the trucks and what has been happening in the logistics sector. You can hear him saying that really the economy cannot afford, even you at home, you cannot afford to see the logistics and this industry really disrupted and the economy disrupted here. But most of them also, Francis, talking about us getting the railway sector right in the country that will ensure that at least there's just less and less of those trucks on the road as the cargoes and the goods, 82% of those cargoes and the goods will then, some of them move into the railway sector, and that will then mitigate in terms of this large number of trucks that we see on the roads daily. Francis?
Of course, thank you very much, Katlego Lechodi. And of course, this is a crucial industry under attack.